John Eats Cheap, welcome back. Yeah, it's new hip, no shave November. And this is first time I'm gonna try a video, a little cooking. Mrs. Cheap said, oh, please get back in the kitchen. So I'm gonna try it now. I'm feeling better. I'm working, I'm still gotta have the cane handy. But it's a chilly day and we're ready for some beef stew. Homemade beef stew. I love canned beef stew. I love all beef stews. This is the way I make it homemade. We had some potatoes. I diced those up. Had a pound of stew meat. You know what? The price of stew meat is outrageous. If you get it at the meat counter, it's usually like $4 or $5 a pound. This is from our side of beef that we buy, so it is cheap. But you can buy it, the cheapest sirloin tip, something when it's on sale. It can be really, really lean. It doesn't matter because it cooks so low and slow that it always gets tender. So use a cheap cut of beef for your beef stew. I always use some beef stew mix, some mixed veggies, peas and carrots. I got a little corn, a few pearl onions, some dehydrated onions. I love these in my beef stew. And it's something that I never make the same every single time, but I'll show you how I basically do it, and then you just kind of test it and keep it until it's all good and ready to go. Beef stew in the crock pot. So I'm just gonna do a small crock pot. I usually do, extra and freeze it, but I'm just gonna do, it's a pound of beef stew meat. I'm gonna add some flour, probably half a cup of flour into the stew meat. And this is what's gonna make it thick. So we do that in there and then just mix it up. Make sure it's all good and coated. And this will brown it up a little bit, and as I say, that's what'll make the beef stew thick, like beef stew should be, as opposed to just vegetable beef soup. So we got the hot pan, deep pan. We're gonna just put a little oil in there, just enough to coat the bottom, and then we're gonna brown our beef. Beef stew meat, extra flour, get it in there. It's nice to use a bigger pan so it doesn't get too crowded. And hopefully that'll brown up a little bit. I probably should have gotten it a little hotter. I'm going to add a little bit more oil in there too. There we go. We're just going to let that heat up, brown. We'll stir it, mix it up, and it'll even make a little bit of a start of a roux. Cook that flour, and we'll be able to add our liquid and get it good and thick. Browning nicely. We're going to add a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, and let that continue browning. So the beef is pretty well browned, so now I'm using this stew mix. They have these on sale sometimes, like 2 for $1. It's just got a lot of good, I don't know what the seasonings are. Let's see, spices, onion, beef, it's just good beef flavor. So I like using at least 1 packet of this, and that calls for 3 cups of water. So I've got 3 cups of water here. We're gonna just kind of pour that in to our beef. We don't have to use it all because we're just going to do this to deglaze the pan and let it thicken up. Get that flour off of the meat, let it thicken up. Bring that up to a simmer. Okay, we're almost ready to start assembling into the crock pot. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and put the beef in there, because I'm going to mix some more stuff into the sauce, the beefy sauce. So I'm going to get at least most of the beef in there. Then we'll get our seasoning packet and a little bit of beef gravy mix. Something I always like to throw in to my beef stew. I got the beef stew packet and then brown gravy mix, 29 cents at Aldi. A lot of flavor and thickens it up a little as well. So we'll go ahead and get the beef stew mix in. And no, I'm not following the instructions on the gravy. Bad John Eats Cheap. I just want the flavor. I'm not pouring it over mashed potatoes. So we're going to put that in too. Just, you know, lots of good flavor. So we'll stir this up. You'll see how that'll thicken up a lot too. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and pour the rest of our water in, or at least some of it. I was adding up the cost of this meal. You figure if you get the beef on sale, $2.99 a pound, so that's $3. The seasoning mix, I'll say $1 total for the brown gravy and the beef stew mix. So that's up to $4. The potatoes, it's like 10 cents worth of potatoes, something like that. Our mixed veggies, we always have the bags in the freezer and it's just partial. So this is, I would guess, about $4 for a crock pot full of beef stew. That's eating pretty cheap, considering that's probably the cost of a can of Dinty Moore beef stew if you get the big can with the thumbprint on it. Much cheaper here. And you can make this exactly the way you want it. Whisking this a little bit just to make sure we got all the chunks out. And look at how thick that's gotten now. That is going to be a great beef stew. So I'm going to go ahead and throw our veggies into the crock. Just frozen is fine. Our potatoes into the crock. I better not put them all because I hope we have room here. So I'm not going to quite put them all in yet. Oh yeah, my meat's in there, so I should be good. Just finish it up with the rest of that water. Now also, you can stretch this out. You can add more water. I've got my beef soup base. Great flavor. I like it better than bouillon. And you can use that, which I will do to add it up to fill up the crock pot if I need to. Or if you want to thin it out a little bit, you don't want to use just water, use the beef broth or the soup base. Here we go. Let's hope I can do this without spilling too much. There it goes in. And I think we'll be able to put the rest of our potatoes in. Thank you, Mrs. Cheap. There we go. And look at that. Perfectly full. Oh, that's nice and thick. I'm going to leave that just like that. I'm not going to add any more water. And we're just going to let this go. I like to do it on high for a couple of hours, and then you can turn it down and put it on low. And we're going to be eating beef stew late this afternoon. It's going to be a good dinner. Oh, we almost had a beef stew tragedy. I forgot my favorite dehydrated chopped onions. So I better put some extra in. I love the way these rehydrate in beef stew. So I'm going to put a lot of them in. Mrs. Cheap gave me the okay. They're not her favorite, but she said, you know what? You're working hard. It's your first time back. Take it kind of easy. So I'm just going to stir those in so those will get nice and hydrated. Now, it was one of those times where I was looking around going, I know I forgot something. That was it. Tragedy averted. Little update on the beef stew. We're about 4 or 5 hours in. I've turned it down to low. I went ahead and filled it up about another half a cup to a cup of water because I didn't add any water to go with the beef, brown gravy mix that I put in. So I've turned it down, just stirred it up a little bit. I mean, that looks pretty good, doesn't it? But I'm going to let it go a little bit more. It's on low. I'm going to be really hungry. Mrs. Cheap is going to make some garlic beer bread that we're going to have to go with it. Eating cheap. This is like, what did I say, $4 worth of stew, something like that. Tasty stuff. And the finished product, slow cooker crock of beef stew. And there's plenty here for leftovers. I'm going to dig in. Buttering up my beer bread here. So total cost, beef stew, beer bread, and the beer bread is like, you know, beer, some herbs, a little garlic, flour, baking powder or soda or something. I mean, it's easy stuff you probably have around. Just find the recipe. And the beef stew was like $4, $4.25. That's eating cheap. And for some reason, I don't really like crackers with my beef stew. I like bread with it. So that's why we're doing the beer bread. I also like buttering a piece of white bread and dipping it in it. Anyway, let's try it. This is going to be really hot, but beefy and thick. I know I'm going to burn the roof of my house, the roof of my house, the roof of my mouth. Always do. That is some great beef stew. Good way to get your veggies too. I've tried a bite of this beer bread. This is cheap, never made this before, first timer. It's good. It's a good quick bread. Comfort food. Cheap. John eats cheap. Thanks for watching.